had my knee surgery, I used to jog. And if you know me, you know that I hated it. I hate to run. And so probably the best thing that the doctor told me after my surgery was, you know, Seth, you probably shouldn't run on that bad knee. I said, you got it. I will follow your example. Not a problem. I think the part that I hated the most about jogging was what I like to call the final mile. And for those of you that run, those of you that have run, you know what I'm talking about. That's where you can see the end point. That final mile, and you're sitting there, you're exhausted, you've got sweat drenching down you, you just want to end, and the problem is, you're here, and the end point is over there. That final mile is just absolutely brutal. That's why I titled these last 8 sermons, the sermon series, in following the blog of Thomas Hall, The Final Mile. Because if you haven't caught on already, or will here over the next few weeks, this last trek that he's had, as he's going through his final state of Texas here, is just brutal. It's tough. So let's go right in and read his blog entry for today. The morning air was heavy. Rain had fallen for days. I had been in Tahoka for 24 hours due to the flooding that made further progress impossible. As I prepared once again to travel to La Mesa, and so La Mesa is right here on the map, I was told that Route 87 to La Mesa was still closed and that I would have to detour to Brownfield. So this is Brownfield over here. And then down to La Mesa, goose chase it would cost me 40 extra miles. Took the detour and got into Brownfield at 11 a.m. and did errands until early afternoon. I traveled 30 plus miles with 30 left to go, arriving at La Mesa and my usual sleepover at church. 17 miles from La Mesa, the weather took on a sinister, frightening shape. The wind suddenly flared into a full-scale gale force, and dark, low-hanging clouds bounded into the overhead formation. I knew that rain would soon drench me, and that I had no tree, building, overhang, or protected place to go. What I didn't know was what was forming off in the distance to the west. Looked like someone had dynamited the ground. A swirl of red dust spun upward. Within 10 minutes, the dust swirl had become a 100,000 square foot wall coming toward the road at an alarming speed. Imagine you're alone, trapped in chaos, facing a wall of fine dust racing toward you at about 50 miles an hour, and you have no place to hide. You realize there's no escaping this red wall that towers from the ground to 2,000 feet over you. Within seconds, it envelops you and you feel the gravelly sand in your mouth and throat. Your camera jams in the dust. Your eyes hurt, and all you can do is brace yourself against the bike and hope that the storm will quickly pass by. Me, I adapted a song I once heard from Sister Ethel. His eye is on the preacher, his eye is on the bike, his eye is on the sparrow, and I know he is watching me. The Martian storm passed after 15 minutes, followed by pelting rain that turned to hail. Regards from Hurricane Alex. Then it passed. Finally, the sun once again came out, and this preacher knew someone had an eye on him and was watching out for him. When I arrived at La Mesa and met the secretary of La Mesa UMC and the wife of the pastor, she welcomed me in, though I could tell she was taken back by my presence. I looked like red hairy Esau, without the hairy, just red, and must have shocked her. The pastor was quick to show me the men's room so I could clean up before supper. Once normal again, we had a great time of sharing in food. Makes you wonder though, does Texas weather ever do normal? This is Thomas Hall, our traveling preacher. He's just trying to get to Del Rio, Texas, which is right down here. And we have been following his blog entries since he started in his home state of Montana. In fact, this picture was taken when he was in Montana, so this is a before picture. Now, we've already outlined in his trek that Thomas knows when to do a change in direction. But now he is facing what he just calls storm. And I admit, this blog entry is really hard to read. You feel for him. You just want him to be okay. You want him to get to his end point in one piece. But I think probably the most difficult part of today's journey for him is just the wave after wave after wave that continues to hit him. The roadblocks are in his way. I think if he would have titled today's message, "A Bad Day," we probably would have understood. Now, as we've already witnessed within his blog entries, his journey really mirrors our own. How many of us here have had our own storms that we've gone through? Yeah. Where we have had wave after wave that just hits us. And all we want to do is we just want to get to our goal. And I'm talking, it could be a big goal like getting down to Del Rio, Texas. Or maybe it's just a minor goal of getting to La Mesa, just so you can have just a little bit of rest, a little bit of opportunity to clean up, have a bite to eat, some safe and secure opportunities out of what life throws at us. I really think in these moments, these storms, a prayer comes to mind. It's one of my favorite prayers. It goes like this. So far today, God, I've done all right. I haven't gossiped. I haven't lost my temper. I haven't been grumpy, nasty, or selfish. I'm really glad for that. But in a few minutes, God, I'm going to get out of bed. And from that moment on, I'm going to need a lot of help. You know, each day, I think we face this. We wake up hoping for the best and fearing that it's going to be a bad day. We have some good days, like today, where the sun is shining, it is perfect, everything just seems to go right, everything goes as planned, and we lay our head on the pillow and we say, "Well done, good and faithful servant." And then we have those days like what Thomas went through. You know, facing the torrent of rain and storm, where it just seems roadblocks are at every corner. And then as this journey gets hard, we begin to ask that question, can I complete this task? Will I reach my goal? And maybe you're thinking to yourself, you know, why do I continue doing this? What is this goal all about? Why am I killing myself to get to this point in my life? You know, that final mile can be so grueling. We're exhausted by the elements, by the weather, by time, by people, by a sick kid, or things that don't go right at work, or that medical report that's not what we needed to hear. Maybe it's just one more thing, and we realize that it is called the final mile for a reason. There's a story about a man named Jim. Jim found out that his wife was seeing someone else and wanted a divorce. Jim was devastated. Took some time off of work, decided to visit friends around the country. One day he was visiting with a friend of his that lived in Philadelphia, and he had a copy of the Daily Guidepost, a devotional guide. And as he was sitting there reading it, he read about a Roman Catholic church in Harper's Ferry. And this church was kind of unique. During the Civil War, it flew a British flag so that neither the North or the South would fire upon it. In fact, it functioned as a hospital for both sides. Well, there was something about this church that just really intrigued him. He wanted to go and visit. So he traveled down to Harper's Ferry. He found the church. It wasn't unique. There was nothing special about it. There wasn't even a plaque that talked about its history, its role during the Civil War. He found the church unlocked. He went in. No one greeted him. He went down and decided maybe he just needed to pray. So he pulled down one of the kneelers. And he got down to pray, and he says, "Okay, God, why am I here?" And he waited about 10 minutes, nothing. So he got up, began to leave the church. And there he saw it. It was a chapel that was kind of tucked off to the side of the church. He couldn't see it when you walked in, but when you were walking out, you could see it. And he turns and he sees this life-size picture of Jesus hanging on the cross. And this picture of Jesus, he's bloody. It is gruesome. He has been beaten. He has been tortured. The blood, the skin has been taken off to the bone. And at that point, Jim realized why God sent him there. As he looked at this very beaten Jesus in pain, he realized that Jesus knew his pain. This is a hard time, people. Ask any senior that's in school right now, and they'll tell you Why do I need to go to class? Why do I need to work on that paper? Why do I need to study for that test? I'm going to graduate anyway. Ask any teacher right now what they're thinking, and they're thinking, I can't wait for summer vacation. Can I get an amen there? Or just go to our Great Plains Annual Conference website. You will find out which pastor is moving where. There are pastors all throughout a denomination that are just going through the motions as they get ready for retirement, as they get ready to go on to the next appointment, as they get ready for something else. And April, the month of April, is a tough month. You talk about extremes in weather. You could mow the lawn one day and scoop the snow the next. Or maybe you have nice days like this where you go outside and then the next day you're so thankful that you still have long sleeve shirts. And for us, this has been a tough time. Got a lot of grief. We've lost a lot of good people. And I'm not just talking about this church, but also our community. We're losing a whole generation, and we're sad. And then there's uncertainty about the future of our country. One day the stock market is up, the next day the stock market is down. The pending trade war has put commodity prices all over the map, and of course that affects our pocketbooks. And there's always that looming question, are we going to have war with North Korea or not? Are we going to have war with Syria or not? I just wish we had the answers to these. This is a hard time, people. And unfortunately, the final mile doesn't get any easier. I'm going to turn to our scripture passage for this morning, because we've been doing that along with Thomas's journey. We've been also following the journey of Paul, as outlined in the book of Acts.
This is Acts 21, 7 through 16. When we had finished the voyage from Tyre, we arrived at Ptolemais, and we greeted the believers and stayed with them for one day. The next day we left and came to Caesarea, and we went into the house of Philip the evangelist, one of the 7, and stayed with him. We had 4 unmarried daughters who had the gift of prophecy. While we were staying there for several days, a prophet named Albus came down from Judea. He came to us and took Paul's belt, bound his own feet and hands with it, and said, Thus says the Holy Spirit, this is the way the Jews in Jerusalem will bind the man who owns this belt, and will hand him over to the Gentiles. When we heard this, we and the people were urged him not to go up to Jerusalem. Then Paul answered, What are you doing, weeping and breaking my heart? For I am ready not only to be bound, but even to die in Jerusalem for the name of the Lord Jesus. Since he would not be persuaded, we remained silent except to say, The Lord's will be done. After these days we got ready and started to go up to Jerusalem. Some of the disciples from Caesarea also came along and brought us to the house of Manasseh of Cyprus, an early disciple with whom we were to stay.
Thank you, Kathy. Darn it. Scripture is not much help here. What do we find out? The road to Jerusalem is going to be tough. There's going to be beatings, there's going to be torture, confrontations, and yeah, probably even death. This final mile, we wonder, is it worth it? And more importantly, why even do it? Why even continue? Why go forward, especially when the storms of life seem so insurmountable? There's a story that takes place in the late 1800s. There's a little boy that just had a really rough day at school, his own storm. He runs home, he hides underneath the kitchen table, his mom's working in the kitchen, and he's just sitting there saying, I'm a dummy, I am stupid, I can't learn anything. Well, his mom coaxes him out of the table, talks with him, and then finds out just how rough school is going for him. And then the mom puts her hands on his shoulders, looks him right in the eye, and says, you can learn your lessons just as well as anybody. Well, I don't know if it was just because she listened, or if it was the words she said or the way she looked at him, but that gentleman said that's all he needed. That's kind of a good shot of confidence in the arm. He did go on to graduate high school. He graduated honors from college, became president of Princeton University and president of the United States. The mother of Woodrow Wilson awakened faith in her son by offering words of encouragement and blessing and helped him be the best that he could be. I want to share with you one of my favorite images that comes out of the Bible. A lot like what we talked about with the Messianic secret. It had always been there. I just never noticed it. What we have here is a boat. Right there. Now, the professor of New Testament, when I was taking this in seminary, Warren Carter, I remember talked about this idea of the boat on the first day of class. And he told us to imagine the biblical world. He said that water was all around you. So represented by water that is in this bowl here. And water is terrifying. But the problem was you couldn't avoid the water. You needed it to water your crops. You needed it to fish in. You needed it for transportation. And at any time it just seemed that the heavens would open up and it would just rain for days. And at any time, it just seems that the ground would open up and it would flood for days. And the only thing that kind of kept it at bay was the hand of God that put earth at various places. But even then, it seemed that when it was flooding and it was raining, the water would go over that area of earth. This was the biblical world. And when that didn't work, at least you had a boat. A boat represented safety, security, and protection. And more importantly, it floated. I remember well that day in class. Our professor took us from one passage to the next, talking about these passages in Scripture where water is really scary. Probably one of the best examples is chapter 8 of verse 18, or chapter 8 of the Gospel of Matthew. The disciples are in a boat. A storm comes up. They're scared. Jesus is off on the shore, and they cry out to Jesus. And what does Jesus do? He walks on top of the water. He's not scared. He's not frightened. He's not terrified. He is commanding this very destructive force of nature. And then if you remember that passage, Peter, he gets out of the boat and he actually begins to take a couple of steps on the water, and then he begins to sink, and then Jesus reaches out his hand and saves him. Now this passage in the gospel was written for people that knew something about storms. These were fishermen, lived on the sea. This was their livelihood. But the metaphor really extended beyond just a mere occupation. These people knew persecution. They were experiencing storms all around them. They were a community on the margins of society. And it was getting harder to be a Christian. Many were wondering, why do we continue? Why do we continue to follow this Jesus? Why can't we just do what our neighbors do and go back to that old religion? They're thinking this final mile with Jesus is just really, really getting difficult. It's a storm. Now I want you to do something. I want you to look up. What do you see? This sanctuary, this church, is an upside-down boat. Some church architects, church does better than others, but it's very intentional. You even find some early terms of the church are related directly with nautical terms. This place, the church, represents a boat. A place where we can come and feel God's safety and security and presence. And feel safe and secure from the storms around us. There's a story about a little girl that was out shopping with her mom. And it was just pouring rain outside. They were getting ready to go out into the parking lot, but it was just raining so hard that there was a whole bunch of customers there right under the awning, just waiting for a break to go out to the parking area. And then all of a sudden, the little girl, she kind of looked at her mom and she said, "Mom, let's run through the rain." And Mom says, "What?" And the little girl just said, "Mom, let's run out in the rain." "No, honey," said the mom, "we'll wait until it kind of dies down a bit." And about a minute later, the little girl goes, "Mom, let's go run out in the rain." And the mom just says, "If we do, we'll get soaked. So let's just wait right here." "No, we won't, Mom," said the little girl. "That's not what you said this morning." And the mom, she kind of said, "Well, this morning, when did I say that we could run through the rain and not get wet?" And the girl said, "Now, don't you remember when we were talking to Daddy about his cancer, and you said if God can get us through this, God can get us through everything?" And the mom thought, how am I going to respond to this little girl? Do I laugh it off? Do I scold her? Do I ignore her? But realizing that she needed to reaffirm both this little girl and everything that she was going through, she said, "Honey, you're absolutely right. Let's run through the rain. If God lets us get wet, well, maybe we just need some washing." Her and her mom took off. And as they ran, all the other customers watched them. They smiled, they laughed as they were darting between cars and jumping through the puddles. And yes, they did get wet, but they also put their bags over their heads to make sure that they were kind of dry for a little bit. And there were even a few of the other customers that also went out like children, running through the rain. I'm here to tell you, we don't have to be scared of the water or the storms or whatever else we're facing. We have a boat. It's called the sanctuary. It's called the place of God, to get us through the storms of life and to finish out the